Botani kuni sizwe sakwaXhosa. Botani nakuni bantwana bomgquba besizwe sikaHintsa. Lo umi phambi kwenu ku-Eva Twala.
My name is Linguistic. I am from Mount Fletcher.
My name is Ntsako Khoza and I am from the city of Johannesburg, which is in Gauteng.
My name is Nkomana Aluluto and I'm from Bizana.
I'm Siam Tanaklas from a small town called Kliplat in the Eastern Cape region.
My name is Mobi Tedimuso Vilagazi and I am from Gauteng in Rijnsburg.
My name is Nicole Matsky. I'm 23 years old. I stay in Dispatch.
My name is Amahle Ngumalo and I was born in South Africa in a small town named Bizana. I am 19 years old and the last school I attended was Edi Chainga Senior Secondary School.
My name is Nwalisa Ontatile Dilema. I am a 19-year-old.
My name is Patna Otlamutupi. I'm a 19-year-old female. I was born and bred in a small town in Northwest called Ceres.
My name is Zandile Isabel Sam. I was born and raised in a small town in Uitenhage in the Eastern Cape. Uitenhage is now called Karega. It is near Port Elizabeth, which is now called Gqeberha.
We are the students of Nelson Mandela University in Linguistic Diversity Group, doing our Bachelor of Education in Foundation Phase, and this is our language learning and language biography. Welcome to our journey. In discussion of language learning and language biography, we said that language biography is a record of personal language learning history, origins, and reflective of language and cultural background. Singabantwana bomgquba besizwe sakwaXhosa nanjengoko simanyene kunye nabantu bebala elimhlophe, loo nto isinika ukubaluleka nobuqaqawuli bokufunda nolwazi ulwimi lwethu nakunye nolwazi lolwimi lwabo. IsiXhosa is my mother's tongue. I started learning isiXhosa mostly at home, learning it through my family with the simple words of foundation like Tata means father and Umama means mother. It depends on the flexibility of a person to get to know much of the words of the language as it has difficult pronunciation during childhood, like igama elithi ithamsanqa means luck.
There are three languages that I understand: isiXhosa, English, and isiSotho. isiXhosa is my first language. I learned isiXhosa at home from my parents and family. My mother is a Xhosa woman and also my father. At school, I did isiXhosa as my home language, so it was very easy to learn isiXhosa.
My mother tongue is Tsonga, so Navulavula. And I was exposed to Tsonga as everyone at my house speaks Tsonga.
I grew up in a monolingual Xhosa family. That's where I learned isiXhosa.
In my learning history, I've learned isiXhosa, Afrikaans, and English. I'm a fluent Xhosa speaking person. I've learned isiXhosa through the help of my parents, family, friends, at school, including in my community where I did a lot of extramural activities. I loved participating in sport and programs that were held in our community. My mother also loved reading me isiXhosa storybooks, so that's how I managed to learn isiXhosa.
My home language is Zulu. My dad is Zulu, and that's where I learned my Zulu from. He was the one that taught me basic Zulu words like ubaba no mama, isitsha, ngena, sawubona, those type of Zulu words. And that's when I developed my Zulu language. My dad's side of the family is from KZN, and that's where I learned most of my Zulu morals from. I visited my dad's side of the family when I was doing grade 8 or 9, and that's when I learned that when you serve food to elders, you have to kneel down. There are certain words that you can't speak when you're with others, and you should not call an elder by their name. Respect is a very important aspect in our culture. Having respect and being proud of who you are is the very important thing in our culture.
My home language is English. Although I did grow up in a Afrikaans household from about the age of 5 after my parents' divorce.
I have one home language, which is isiXhosa language. I acquired the language from my parents and family as they are fluent Xhosa speakers. I learned to speak isiXhosa as a child and learned to use it on an everyday basis.
Both my parents are Setswana speaking. My home language is Setswana. I can conversate in Setswana, but I cannot read and write in Setswana. First time visits to my grandparents' house became very advantageous for me because that is where I got to learn more about my home language.
My language development began at home and in my neighborhood. My mom is Xhosa and my father is Sotho.
There are three main languages that are spoken in Uteleg. It is isiXhosa, English, and Afrikaans. Both of my parents are Xhosa, which makes isiXhosa my mother tongue. Dingu, Zulu, Skoma, Mhlatyana, Khodolo, Snuka, Ntombi Xhosa. Xhosa is the first language that I learned because of this, but unfortunately it always remained on a conversational level. I learned it through speaking to family members and friends just around the community. It was never in a formal educational context. It was always just me speaking to family members.
English is my additional language. I learned the language at home, but mostly at school. And it was the compulsory language of learning, and I firstly had difficulties on it. But as I was being taught on an everyday basis, it was started to be better, and I started to understand the language. And through practice, my language in English was better and perfect. Learning the isiXhosa and English language had a major advantage to my learning. I am now being able to communicate, read, and write both of these languages properly. That was the experience and journey of my language learning and biography.
When it comes to English, I learned English from school. When I was doing grade 1, my teacher used to tell us that it is very important to know English so that we can be able to communicate with other different people. So today I know English well. I can speak, talk, and listen to it. There is a language that is Sesotho. I learned Sesotho from my neighbors and my friends. My friends, when we were playing, they were also using Sesotho. And at first it was difficult for me to understand them. But today I am very happy that they taught me Sesotho. Now I can speak, talk, and listen to Sesotho.
I'm fluent in isiZulu because I grew up in the township where Zulu was the common language, and I went to a township crash where we were taught like basic things in isiZulu. Then when I turned 6 years, I went to a primary school whereby the language we spoke was English and Afrikaans. So our home language in that school was English. And I got a white teacher, so she communicated with us with English. So it was a must for us to know English. I didn't struggle a lot because I think English was quite basic with me. Then I went to grade 4. When I got to grade 4, I was introduced to Afrikaans. We had to praat. And then she taught us, she was so our teacher was so patient with us. And I also learned Afrikaans because I watched Seven de Land and my family helped me, so I was able to speak that language. Then 2023 I came to Eastern Cape to study at Nelson University, and the language spoken in Eastern Cape is isiXhosa, so I had to learn how to communicate in isiXhosa, and I have a module whereby we have Xhosa conversation. So basically now I'm multilingual because I'm able to speak 4 languages, which is a great experience, and I will be able to use it in my teaching career. So yeah, that is my language biography. Thank you.
Due to traveling, I learned isiZulu as I would often visit my grandmother in KwaZulu-Natal. When I started going to school, I learned English, which was quite challenging because it was different from the past 2 languages that I have learned. But I was able to overcome those obstacles. When I got here in varsity in Nelson Mandela University, I learned Afrikaans, which was very, very challenging. I don't want to lie to you, but I'm still learning, I'm still learning and I'm hoping for the best.
Afrikaans was the second language I got introduced to. I've learned Afrikaans when I was still a child. Afrikaans dominated in our neighborhood. That's how I've managed to learn it. I can only speak Afrikaans. I can't read and write it. The third language I got introduced to is English. I got introduced to English in primary school when I was doing grade 4. It was hard to learn English, especially when it was time for presentation. In presentation, I would speak something that was hard to comprehend. So when time went by, I listened and paid attention to fluent English speakers. I knew that in my heart that I wanted to speak English the same way. So I pushed myself. I went to libraries every day and studied English stories, English books. When time went by, I could also speak, read, and write English. Even though I'm not that fluent, but I believe one day I will be.
In grade 3, I transferred from a public school to a private school. So in the public school, we were taught most of our things in isiZulu, from counting isiZulu, and our teacher taught us to speak isiZulu in the classroom. So when I got to the new school, I was struggling a lot because the language that I was taught with in the new school was English, and English was not a language that I was familiar with. In the new school, I was exposed to English and Afrikaans. Afrikaans gave me a very big challenge because even now I don't know the language, even though I've been learning it for more than I don't know how many years. But I eventually got the hang of learning English in the new school. That's how I am now able to communicate in English fluently. I am now a student at Nelson Mandela University, and I have a module that is in Xhosa. It's very exciting for me to learn Xhosa because it's not something that I was exposed to in the past. I am very dedicated and interested in learning Xhosa because I feel like since I am in Eastern Cape, it's a language that most of the people speak here.
I did stay in East London with my mom, my dad, and my dad's side of the family who was strictly English. So I did learn English from them. And then at the age of 5, we did move to Port Elizabeth. And this is where we stayed with my mom's side of the family. They are Afrikaans. So at the age of 5, this is where I did start learning Afrikaans by listening to them and sometimes speaking to them a little bit in Afrikaans. When I started school, this was where I was exposed to isiXhosa. My best friend in primary school was isiXhosa spoken. So every now and then during break times, we would sit and she would teach me some words and what they meant and all of that. Over time, I did learn a lot because today I am able to understand what is being spoken about. Although I cannot understand it 100%, I can get an idea of what is being spoken. I also cannot read or write in isiXhosa, but now in university I am taking a course in isiXhosa, so I'll be learning conversational isiXhosa where I am able to read and write it. So I do believe that knowing more than one language can be beneficial when teaching foundation phase, as it will improve the communication between me and my students.
I started attending primary where I first learned English as a first additional language. It was very hard for me because I was not used to the language. But most subjects were taught using it, so I had to adapt, and within 6 months I was able to communicate using the language. During my high school years, I met different learners who spoke a different home language than mine. Some spoke isiXhosa, some spoke isiZulu, some Sesotho, and some Afrikaans. It was very hard to learn and hear what they were saying as I was not used to the language. So we used that opportunity to teach each other simple words like greeting using our home languages. For example, isiXhosa, you use molweni. In English, you use hello. And then in Sesotho, you use dumela or dumelang. And then in Afrikaans, you say hello. So it was very fun and an interesting experience for all of us. And I learned that if you can speak a lot of languages, it helps so you can communicate and meet new people around the world globally.
I am a multilingual person. I can fluently speak Xhosa, Tswana, Sotho, Zulu, Afrikaans, English, Swati, and Pedi. One of the reasons why I came to the Eastern Cape is because I wanted to know more about the language that is dominating here.
I'm able to read, communicate, and speak in 4 South African languages, which are the isiXhosa language, Sesotho, English, and Afrikaans. My language development began at home and in my neighborhood. My mom is Xhosa and my father is Sotho. So I spent the first few years of my life in Pretoria, in Gauteng. In my neighborhood, you either spoke English, we had some white neighbors and some Indian neighbors, Sepedi, Tswane, or Sesotho, right? So I was exposed to the English language before I started school because I had white neighbors and I became friends with the children, right? And then I went to preschool. That is where I first learned the English language on a deeper level. At the age of 7, I then moved to the Eastern Cape where the isiXhosa language dominates. So my mom is Xhosa, but at home we never spoke Xhosa much. So it was a bit difficult for me to speak Xhosa, but then my grandmother took me to church with her. I joined the church Sunday school. We spoke isiXhosa there. We were given the isiXhosa children's Bible. I read the Bible. That's how I learned how to read, write, and communicate effectively in the isiXhosa language. I then joined word school Excelsior, which is an Afrikaans school, primary school, where I got my primary education, and that is where I was exposed to the Afrikaans language. I quickly made friends who spoke Afrikaans as their home language. It was not that hard for me to learn Afrikaans at all. Instead, I was very excited and eager to learn about the language and the culture of the Afrikaans people. And fast forward to high school. High school, we had whites, coloreds, blacks. Mainly, we spoke isiXhosa, Afrikaans, or English. And that is my language biography, and that is how I'm able to speak 4 South African languages.
And then the second language that I learned was English. I first learned it through watching television. I was very obsessed with English shows as a child. But in a more formal setting, I learned English and Afrikaans at the same time in primary from the age of 7. I learned them throughout until matric. I stopped with Afrikaans in matric, but English has always been a part of my life. It still is. I know English a lot better than I do isiXhosa and Afrikaans. I can't really explain why this is so, but I've been exposed to it more, and it was taught to me at a home language level in school, and Afrikaans was first additional. So I only know the basics. I can listen to someone that's speaking to me in Afrikaans, but I cannot respond in Afrikaans. Not because I was never taught to respond in Afrikaans, but I never entertained speaking Afrikaans much, so I forgot it. I don't really know it that much anymore. But yeah, I'm very grateful for the fact that I know all 3 languages. Makes my life very, very easy, especially considering the fact that I've always lived in the Eastern Cape.
So guys, that was the Linguistic Diversity Group biography, and thank you for listening.